Welcome back to Blackwater Honey's Is Beekeeping for You series. Today, we're diving into a new explainer all about preparing your beehives for fall and winter. A lot of beginners just kind of assume that a colony starts getting ready for winter when that first frost hits. But let's completely dispel that myth right now. Preparing your hives starts weeks, honestly, even months earlier. If you're waiting for the cold to set in, you are already way too late. Tossing on a wrap and an entrance reducer that simply cannot repair the hidden losses that happen in late summer. So, let's build a confident, biologically sound fall plan together.
Here's what we're going to cover in our winter survival system. We'll go over raising your winter bees, the essential fall inspection, testing and treating for Varroa mites, securing food and space, managing moisture and climate, and finally, midwinter checks and beyond. Breaking this overwhelming task down into these modular steps makes it totally achievable. Okay, part 1, raising your winter bees and the biological timeline. We really have to shift our mindset here and work backward from your local winter to late summer brood production. The golden rule here, winter preparation begins while winter bees are being raised, absolutely not after the first freeze. Here's a fascinating bit of biology for you. Winter bees are fundamentally different from summer bees. They're actually born with these plump fat bodies, which are internal energy reserves specifically designed to sustain them for months on end. If mites and viruses damage those developing, long-lived bees, the damage is completely permanent. You literally cannot repair it later in the season. So, for a colony to truly thrive, the complete winter survival system needs a few core things. You need healthy, long-lived bees, a functional queen, low Varroa pressure, adequate reachable food, a right-sized space, dry equipment, a defensible entrance, and a solid follow-up plan. But keep in mind, there are no universal calendar recipes in beekeeping. You always have to adjust your exact dates and food targets for your specific local climate.
Moving on to Section 2, the essential fall inspection. Basically, you need to collect evidence before acting. Before we change a single thing in the hive, we have to treat this phase as a critical fact-finding mission. During that fall inspection, you're looking for hard evidence. You want to record the population size and the cluster distribution. Definitely verify the queen's status. Now, you don't actually have to see her, but you absolutely need to see eggs and a solid brood pattern. You also need to know your current Varroa levels, the hive's food weight, and exactly where that food is placed. Finally, check the physical equipment for any rot or leaks, and keep an eye out for pests like ants or yellow jackets. Gather all this data before making any major moves. Now, what if you find a failing queen or a super weak colony? Well, combining compatible, healthy colonies is a fantastic practice. But whatever you do, never try to play hero by giving a sick, weak colony to a strong one just to save it. Endangering your strong hive by tossing in diseased brood or unknown comb is a classic trap. Honestly, sometimes it's much better to manage them separately or just consult a local mentor to help you make the call. That brings us to Section 3, Varroa mites, test and treat. This is the highest priority fall health decision. I literally cannot stress this enough. This is the climax of your fall preparation. The rule is simple. Test, do not guess. A colony can look incredibly strong but still collapse rapidly if Varroa is hiding out of sight. Just looking for visible mites or deformed wings on the bees? That is not adequate monitoring. Guessing is simply not an option for a responsible beekeeper. You absolutely must use a validated adult bee sampling method, like an alcohol wash or a powdered sugar roll. Here is your non-negotiable Varroa control sequence. Step 1, sample the nurse-aged bees. Step 2, count the mites and check your current regional thresholds. Step 3, choose a legal treatment option that's compatible with your outside temperature and whether or not you currently have honey supers on. Step 4, apply it exactly by the label. The label is the law, guys. Definitely no homemade remedies here. And Step 5, verify. Just applying a treatment isn't proof that it actually worked. You must do a post-treatment verification to ensure it was effective. Let's jump into Section 4, securing food and space and customizing for your climate. This is where we focus on building out the physical environment of the hive. If you need to feed a light colony and the weather is still pretty warm, liquid heavy syrup is a common go-to. But you have to finish feeding that liquid early enough for the bees to actually dehydrate it before prolonged cold sets in. If the weather is already freezing out, the bees might just ignore the liquid feed entirely. In that scenario, solid sugar or fondant acts as your vital cold weather emergency insurance. Okay, here are some absolute non-negotiable rules for space and food. First,
Always leave the colony's winter requirement before taking any harvest for yourself. Second, never feed unknown honey to your bees. It is a fast track to importing foul brood spores. Third, consolidate your boxes tightly so the bees aren't wasting energy patrolling empty space. And fourth, this is huge, remove any queen excluders below winter stores. If you leave an excluder in, the worker bees might move up into the honey during the winter, leaving the queen trapped below to freeze. It's like a tragic Shakespearean play, and we definitely want to avoid that. Section 5, Managing Moisture and Climate. Defending the hive structure. Now we're looking at the actual physics of the hive and protecting it from the elements. Let's talk about condensation. This happens when the warm, moist air generated by the bee cluster rises and hits a cold surface. If it drips back down as freezing rain onto the bees in the middle of winter, it can be absolutely fatal. You need a safe, locally appropriate path for ventilation to vent or absorb that moisture. This is where proper insulation comes into play. Adding top insulation keeps the ceiling warm, pushing that condensation to the cooler sidewalls instead. It's all about balancing heat retention without turning the hive into a freezing, drafty wind tunnel. When it comes to defending the hive structure, you'll want to install mouse guards early, well before rodents decide your hive looks like a cozy winter bed and breakfast. You also need to reduce entrances to stop robbing because that can escalate incredibly fast. Also, absolutely stop any open feeding during a nectar dearth to prevent the spread of disease. And lastly, physically secure your covers against harsh winter winds using heavy straps or weights. It's so important to remember that different regions demand entirely different priorities. For instance, a cold continental climate means early mite control, ample stores, and planning for snow access. A mid-Atlantic winter requires you to balance wild weather swings. In a mild southern winter, longer brood rearing means mites and food consumption never really stop. A mountain climate? That means securing the hive against heavy snow loads and those tricky late spring freezes. In an arid climate requires a really strict focus on water availability. So consult your local mentors. There is no single universal date or recipe that works everywhere. Finally, Section 6, Midwinter Checks and Beyond. Monitoring without disruption. Let's look at how to keep an eye on things during the dead of winter without causing any harm. Do not fall into those classic beginner traps. Don't wait for the first freeze to start preparing. Never guess your mite levels. Avoid relying on universal calendar dates instead of paying attention to your local conditions. Never, ever leave a queen excluder beneath winter stores. And please, do not open feed syrup. If you avoid these specific pitfalls, I guarantee your winter survival system will be incredibly strong. Once winter actually sets in, your goal shifts to minimally invasive monitoring. You'll want to heft or weigh the hives consistently just to track their food consumption, watch the entrances on warm flight days for activity, dead bee buildup, or any signs of mice. But most importantly, never pull brood frames in cold weather. You have to keep your curiosity in check and keep disruption to an absolute bare minimum. Successful wintering is really a complete system. You need to set your targets locally, record your actions, and monitor carefully. Because honestly, here's the ultimate question. If your bees barely survive the winter on life support, how can you possibly expect them to thrive and produce in the spring? Before any honey leaves that hive next season, you absolutely must know what belongs to the bees and what is truly surplus. Your first honey harvest, is the honey ready?